What's up, everyone? Today I am joined by Christoph Denk from Oceamo. If you saw the previous podcasts in the past, we talked about the Organo-MS test. It's been about 8 months since it was released, and there's a lot of new changes coming and a lot that's been discovered in that time. So we're going to talk to Christoph today about organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, and how these things tie into our reef tanks. Thanks for coming on, Christoph. How are you doing today?
Hi, Salem. Thanks very much for having me again. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I'm doing quite well. So really excited talking about the Organo-MS with you and presenting some of the results to the community.
So I think we'll get started with, let's start at the complete basics, people that don't have any chemistry knowledge. A lot of people are familiar with what an ICP machine is. Could you explain a bit how inorganic is different than organic chemistry and how the Organo-MS is different than ICP? And maybe even go into ICP, OES versus MS. So a bit
Yeah.
there, but the overview.
Okay, that's tough keeping it short. But with ICP, I mean, we're doing ICP as well, and ICP is a technique that focuses on inorganic chemistry, and we're looking after elements, and the elements you can find on the periodic table. So there is I think currently it's 118 different elements, and only a fraction of these elements is relevant for us in the reef tank. There is trace elements, there is some macro elements like calcium, magnesium. We all know those are important. There is heavy metals like lead and uranium that might be problematic in the biological consensus. But that's about it. With ICP, we focus on elements, and there is so much more out there chemistry-wise. Like the organic world, when you think about pharmaceuticals, about hormones, about pesticides, about amino acids and sugars, and all those different things that obviously don't appear on the periodic table. So they are not elements. There must be something else, and they are part of the organic chemical space. So we're not talking about elements anymore. We're talking about molecules or structures or compounds, and those are basically set or are combinations of different elements that are bound together. And in organic chemistry, this is mainly carbon, this is hydrogen, this is oxygen, and that's about it. And just by combining these elements, you can form a lot of different substances. That's like in the millions or many millions actually, from sugars and essential vitamins to the most potent toxins known to mankind, all basically consist out of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and a few more elements.
Yeah, a lot of people that I talk to working at the local Shop-A-Mat now, they think that ICP is the end-all be-all. I've got perfect ICP results. Why do I have issues? And there's that whole other world that you're finally touching on, which I think is quite exciting because, there's kind of endless possibilities of how many problems there could be.
It is, and it was a chemical space that was completely ignored before because everybody did like ICP. And even in ICP, there had been like significant improvements the last years, pushing the detection limits down for the ultra trace elements, so we can actually diagnose like selenium deficiency or copper deficiency. This was just not possible with the ICP OES technology, which was used for a long time. So even in ICP, it's very, very well advanced, but there has been like a lot of progress the last years. But the organic side, these millions of different compounds have been completely ignored. Yeah, nobody told you there is something like this before, and it always bugged me because I'm organic chemist by training. I was doing a lot of synthetic work, and so I was always aware about the organic chemistry side of things, but it's just not as straightforward to measure. And it's quite also some investment and commitment. And last year we had the opportunity to start into this direction. And now it's like we're entering a dark room with a small flashlight and start exploring and looking around what we find there.
So there has been a lot that you have found with that flashlight, which we'll get to in a second. Before we talk about some of the interesting discoveries you've made in the last 8 months, let's talk a little bit about how does this machine work? What does the lab space look like? How sensitive is it? What has to go on your end to get good results for people that send in a test?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Salem. It's because many people think you buy the machine and just put the machine on some desktop and you're ready to go. And that's obviously not the case. Alone for ICP to have like good quality data without any contamination, we need to invest quite a lot of work into that. Like our lab is under a positive pressure. This means we fill it with air, and this air is filtered over a microfilter, so there is no particulates in it, and also activated carbon filter. So even if the air outside is like stinky for whatever reason, like in the lab, the air is always of very high purity. And this is just because ICP MS and also the Organo-MS are so super sensitive that every contamination could cause issues, or we're only working with highly trained, very professional staff in the lab. Everybody's wearing, those hair nets, so to not spread like all your hair and stuff like everywhere, because this would be like a huge contamination issue. And yeah, the machine, the Organo-MS, it's a mass spectrometer like an ICP-MS, but it works in a different way. You inject the sample, and the sample gets separated. The compounds in the sample get separated on a column, and at the end of the column, it enters the mass spectrometer, and like those compounds that enter the mass spectrometer are ionized and are separated by mass, so you can find out the exact mass of this compound, and then you can move one step further and like do a collision experiment where you basically break this compound, this molecule into pieces, and then scan it again. Because unfortunately, there's quite many compounds that might have the same mass or the same formula, but they're still structurally different. And with this approach, we can find out about the structural differences and assign even unknown compounds.
So is that how the non-targeted screening works then with the results page?
Exactly. Yeah, we have the results is like a targeted section where we have a list of around 150 chemicals that are particularly interesting to us. It's amino acids, there is some vitamins, there is a broad list of pesticides and cosmetic additives and stuff like that. But the chemical space is so much wider than that. So we want to capture even compounds that we're not searching for initially. Yeah. And this is how the non-targeted screening works. So basically we can take like any water, any sample, and inject it into the machine, and compare those collision spectra we acquire at high resolution with databases and with a lot of computational algorithms going on like in the background. So there's quite a long time of data processing as well. And then we gain a list of compounds that are in the sample. It's never possible to catch like 100%, but we are aiming to catch a very broad variety of substances ranging from very lipophilic to very hydrophilic. But I think we're going to go into this when we talk a bit more about the report afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's get into, that's kind of a good summary of how things work. I'm going to edit in right here. I'll have a kind of a scroll down of what the typical results page looks like from an Organo-MS test and just the large amount of different compounds it can pick up. Let's talk about some of the fun ones you might have detected in the last close to a year now. You told me some pretty interesting ones.
Yeah, you mean in a reef tank?
In a reef tank, and then we can also talk about the money and the wastewater as well.
Yeah, that's also interesting. But in a reef tank, I mean, what I find very interesting is that the aquarist is way more in equilibrium with his own reef tank than I was thinking before, because we often find pharmaceuticals in the tank. And then in most cases, it turns out that the aquarist who runs the tank is taking those medications for whatever reason. Some prescribed medications. And we find these medications in the reef tank in the non-targeted screening. This is often the case when, I mean, everything you take gets excreted via sweat as well. So you have it on your hands, and then you just reach into your tank, and the water dissolves your sweat and all the components that are excreted with the sweat, and then you find it in the analysis. So the tank always tells you something about the tank owner as well, which is quite interesting. And this is something that was really came as a surprise to me, because I wasn't aware that there is so much input from the aquarist into the water, like to a level where it might affect the livestock in a tank.
Yeah, I remember that
So
you told me this story about what testosterone replacement cream had nuked a tank or led to some fish deaths, perhaps?
yeah, this was happen. This was a customer from Reef Moonshiner from Andre. And yeah, there was a quite high testosterone level in the tank, and there has been some fish issues. Yeah, and I wasn't aware that testosterone is often applied topically, like as a cream, and that can also enter the reef tank when you reach into the water. What we frequently find is like chemical UV filters, like in sunscreens and other cosmetic products. Those are very persistent on the hands, and when you apply some sunscreen and reach into the tank, like within the next days, you have it. Yeah, and those are often very. I mean, it's banned in Hawaii and in other places for a reason, because those compounds are fairly toxic to marine livestock, especially to coral. So it's definitely something you want to avoid in your home aquarium.
I
So
saw. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, this is I think that the test really helps to gain awareness, because those are things I personally didn't think so much beforehand. Okay, what did I do like 3 days ago? Yeah, might this have an impact on my reef tank? Should I wash my hands before? Should I put on gloves? And with this data on hand, it's yeah, you have solid data, and you know that those things can have an impact, and can react accordingly.
Yeah, at this point, after our first conversation, I've switched to kind of like the arm, shoulder length gloves now. And I try to use that as much as possible because I'm now so anal and paranoid about it. And, I've thought back and if I've ever worked at a reef shop and you work a long weekend, you put your hands in salt water so many times, they kind of begin to chap. So I'm
Mm.
always putting on lotion on like Black Friday weekend and things like that. And now I'm thought like, how many torches have died because I reached under the tank with lotion on my
With
hands
the
for a long
lotion.
weekend?
Yeah, I think that the gloves are the safer option. You might introduce some plasticizers with them, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. God, there's no perfect option, is there? Wow.
No, I mean there is no way to not like that. That's also an issue with sampling for the Organo-MS, because we had to experiment like with different materials to see, okay, which sample vial and which syringe works best, which doesn't introduce like the most impurities, because water, no matter in which syringe and filter and sample vial you put it, there will always be something that ends up into the water. Yeah. So our job was to characterize like those things quite well, so we can exclude them from the actual report.
Yeah, now that's really impressive to me because in college I got to mess around quite a bit with GCMS and I
Mhm.
was sampling some products for fun back then, and you would always get kind of plastic-based compounds, I assume from the container, or maybe it was the syringe I was using. I don't even know back then, but there was
Yeah.
always that noise.
No, it's everywhere. Like all those plastic additives, like the phthalates, and so you can find them everywhere. Even when you sample air, you find phthalates, because you have some plastic around in your surrounding, and they all like this diffuses into the air. So you have some traces everywhere. But just because you have it detectable doesn't mean it's dangerous. You always have to keep in mind that the sensitivity of those instruments is so extremely high. Yeah, and like caffeine, like everybody drinks coffee or Monster or Club Mate or whatever. Yeah, so there is some caffeine exposure to almost everyone, and that's the reason why we find caffeine like in almost every tank. Yeah, and like a customer was sending in a sample from a well. He had a well in his garden, and he sampled the water from the well because he wanted to know if there's any pesticides in it. And we found some caffeine in the well in the garden. It was quite interesting. But then we calculated, okay, how much like how much is it that's actually in there, and you would need like um, you would need to pour 1 cup of espresso like into 2 million liters of water to get the concentration of caffeine we found in this well. Yeah. So it was extremely dilute, but still a strong signal for us.
It still just amazes me though that things stick around that long in the environment. I mean, no wonder people get cancer like at higher rates. It's I don't know, stuff like this. It's like what else is sticking around? I mean, I know that you've seen a lot of pesticides and herbicides in systems as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is like atrazine. This is a herbicide that was used like in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s quite a lot. And I think here in the Union, it was banned like in 1992, so a long time ago. And still we find it in most drinking water samples because this is just so biopersistent. You think about organics that those, are short half-life compounds and they are degraded quite fast and blah, blah, blah. That's true for some compounds, but for many, it's just not the case. Yeah, they're very persistent, and that a chemical that's forbidden to use for like decades, and you still find it in drinking water. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, yeah. And I mean those non-targeted screening and environmental pollution, this is really frontline analytical chemistry. So this is also a field that emerges a lot like in environmental monitoring because yeah, there is problems like cancer, and there is problems that fertility rates are decreasing. And when when you look into the supermarket, into the area with all the cleaning products and all the pharmacy products and all that, I mean, everything you see there is ending up in the environment. Everything goes down the drain one way or the other. Yeah, there is basically no other disposal routes. So it's even when water treatment is working nicely, it's very clear that some chemicals just accumulate and distribute into the environment, and some of those just have effects at very low levels.
Yeah, I'll put the results you sent me up from like the wastewater. It looked like an open waterway. I don't know which one it was from, but I mean, there was a ton of pharmaceuticals and a couple more exciting compounds it looked like found in the water.
Yeah, that was interesting. We got some water from a runoff from a wastewater treatment. So this was from a community, so no industrial wastewater, just household waste that gets cleared in many stages, like aerobic and anaerobic, and a lot of bacteria like munching on this water, and at the end it's like declared very pure and is released back into the environment. And we used this water for non-targeted screening and found like 300 different pharmaceuticals that are just used in this community. Yeah, a lot of antidepressants and blood pressure increases and things that work the other way, and a lot of cholesterol reduces, and yeah, just what you would expect. Yeah, some drugs as well, and really a very very broad spectrum. And this was just a very interesting study because, yeah, we don't find as many compounds in a reef tank typically. Yeah, so this was a very interesting sample for us. But we had reef tanks which are really freaky, where I was thinking, okay, this reef tank must be in a pharmacy or something because there was a variety of different compounds where you really ask, okay, how could they enter the tank? Yeah.
You remember there was like what cocaine? There was different amphetamines. There was a lot of interesting stuff on a few of those.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's just chemicals that are around, and even if we find something like this in a reef tank, I mean, that doesn't mean that the reef tank owner is using those substances. It might have been the person who packed the the feed stuff that's fed to this reef tank. So you don't know. So this is absolutely not about finger pointing in any way. Yeah. But it's just interesting that those things can be detected. Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing that really was interesting to me is I've seen, quite a few results that have been sent to me where Cipro and metronidazole are still at detectable levels. And it's been maybe 6, 7 months since some of these people have used these compounds as an in-tank treatment. And it makes me wonder, it's like, at that level, at that concentration, could there still be some bioactive effects on things? I'm not sure. But
I guess
yeah,
so. I mean, it won't be bactericidal because
right.
you need like a higher concentration for this, but still it will. I mean, those antibiotics have a very strong mechanism on action on DNA replication or whatever. Yeah, so there will still be some impact. And like a prime example is also what's the name, levamisole. That's
Yes.
like a deworming medication, and there's an interesting story about levamisole as well. But we like this stuff is so persistent. It gets dosed to a reef tank to get rid of flatworms, and we find it like a year afterwards, still in high concentration, despite the use of activated carbon, despite water changes. It's just there, and also fluconazole. I mean, it's I can spot a fluconazole treated tank usually 2 years after the dose has been applied.
Wow.
So yeah, that's really a long way. I mean, of course, the concentration goes down, but it also seems to, like, all these antibiotics seem to bind basically to biological surfaces, maybe in the biofilm, and this is in equilibrium with the tank's water. So even when you apply carbon, you might manage to get down the levels to non-detectable, but the moment you remove the carbon, it's coming back from the biofilm or from the rockwork. I can't tell, and yeah, it gets detectable again. So always when using those medications, you have to be aware it's not like, you use carbon and it's out again. It's something that follows you for quite some time.
Yeah, that was something I've been meaning to ask you. If you thought that, like, let's say I buy a bunch of tank, like, old rock from a tank breakdown, what is the likelihood that that rock comes with some skeletons in the closet, so to speak, and it could be containing a lot of these?
I mean, if some medications have been used, it's very likely you introduce some of them into the tank. But it's the good old Paracelsus saying, like, everything is poison and nothing is poison. It's only the dose that matters.
Yeah.
And so if there, it's the same with copper. Yeah, it's a essential trace element at one side, but becomes very toxic if it's elevated. Yeah, and also an issue with used rock and copper dissolving from the surfaces. Yeah, so could be, but if just because you have some Cipro detectable doesn't mean it has really negative impact on your tank. It's always a matter of concentration. Yeah.
It makes me kind of think that maybe live rock from the ocean could be potentially worse to get and start. I mean, if you've got something from Tampa Bay, like a lot of people do, or the Gulf, and it's right by wastewater effluent. I,
You gotta send me some samples from Tampa Bay. Yeah, but I've recently had a natural seawater sample from Thailand, and this was very clean from a chemical perspective. So we had some sunscreen we could detect, which didn't come as a surprise because it's a famous diving site there. But we didn't find any herbicides or pesticides or like anthropogenic runoff that you would expect. So that was pretty clean from a organic contaminant side of things. Yeah.
Interesting. So I think this is kind of if anyone's listening to this and has not heard of this concept, they probably have a pretty good idea of what this kind of does as a baseline. Let's kind of get into some of the particular kind of chemical groups or families that it reports on, and maybe some roles or interesting, data that can give consumers. So I saw the kind of biogenic amines. I don't remember that being when we originally
Yeah.
talked. Palytoxins on there. Let's run through a couple of those.
Yeah, sure. So the biogenic amines, there is a bunch of those, but the two we measure is cadaverine and putrescine. I mean, those cadaverine doesn't have such a nice name, and it really that's associated with decaying organic matter and with the smell emitted by decaying organic matter. So this is really a nasty compound. And we use it as a bioindicator for like rotting processes in your tank. If there is some live rock fouling on the inside, or if you have some fish got missing and they're rotting away something in the previous hide spot. Things like that. Usually those compounds are at a very low level or even undetectable. But if they are elevated, you should really check, okay, is there any fouling processes going on in your tank? Yeah. Then we have the marine toxins, which is where the paletoxin is in. And the good news about paletoxin, we usually don't find it in tanks. Even if there is a lot of Paletoa species in the tank, we don't really find paletoxin in the water. I guess it's skimmed out quite efficiently. And also my thinking is that the anemones don't release it very much like into the water column without any stressing events. And like the next step would be like a zoantid torture experiment. Like yeah, no zoantids will be harmed in this experiment. So. No, but just to simulate, a little bit of temperature stress or of being predated by a fish or some physical stress, and measure again to see if there is any toxins released into the water column. So I think that would be really interesting. Yeah. And the same with domoic acid, which is a marine toxin that alters brain function quite a lot. And there is issues with sea lions that they feed on fish, and the fish have been swimming in this algal bloom. It's diatoms producing this domoic acid, and it's messing with your neuron system or with your neurotransmitters. And thus those sea lions really get, they lose their fear, and they really behave strangely. And yeah, it could be could be a story for horror movies. Yeah. And I was really expecting to find this compound in reef tanks as well, but we never did, despite having really good limits of detection for domoic acid. So it's also that we didn't find it like in a lot of samples. It means it's not a widespread problem. It might be in very isolated cases, but generally this is nothing to be afraid about. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know, though. I mean, there's always been so many open-ended questions about toxins and their potential accumulation in reef tanks, especially palitoxin. I had not even heard of the other one until you just explained it to me. So that's, yeah, I'm sure if you can get some more standards for different ones and knock them out, maybe there is maybe some of the ones produced by dinoflagellates. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean there is dinoflagellates of the genus Ostreopsis. They're known to produce ovotoxin, which is a toxin which is structurally very related to paletoxin. So like in the same toxicity class. We want to include this ovotoxin A quite soon, and I also want to do some experiments with dinoflagellates and cyanobacteria to really, get the cells, really lyse them to see, okay, what's inside those dinoflagellates. Where have we been with all those marine toxins? I mean, there is the yesotoxins and the bravotoxins and a lot of different, very, very highly complex chemicals that are really hard to synthesize and that are really hard to get a standard for. What we do, we know like the structure and the masses of these toxins. So we monitor if we find these exact masses of those toxins, which would give us a very good indication that those toxins are there. But usually we don't find any of those, so which is a good thing. Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
breath
I mean
of fresh air.
there is one which is interesting. It's called enatoxin A, which is a small molecule, and we found it in non-targeted screening like a few times. And this compound, it's really a small molecule, and it's produced by cyanobacteria that are more associated like to lakes and rivers, so more to like freshwater ecosystems, and not so much to marine systems. And so it was quite surprising finding this toxin in marine tanks. It's not a common sighting, but occasionally. And this toxin has been nicknamed by the scientists who did research on it the very fast death factor.
Oh.
Because I didn't know about this toxin before we found it actually, and when it's given to mice at very low dose, they die within a few minutes, and this is usually this takes like a longer time for toxins to work and to cause issues, but this very fast death factor is acting very fast. And we've seen tanks that reported fish problems, so we had this enatoxin A detected at the same time. So this is not proof that those things are interconnected, but I think the likelihood is very high.
Yeah, this is another point for passively running carbon,
Yeah,
pretty much
it is.
constantly, I would say. Yeah. Hmm. Interesting. So that's another thing you told me about, recently, if you want to talk about it, is what's in some pelleted foods on the market, it seems.
That's also quite interesting. Like some feeds are using the castor plant, which is like very common in gardens because it's nice. And this castor plant produces a very potent toxin. It's called ricin, and it's a peptide, and it's like super toxic. It's been, with some like back in the days with some very prominent murder cases, some ricin was involved. There's some interesting stories to read about, and this castor plant also produces an oil which is quite rich in fatty acids, and so this oil is quite interesting for the food industry or for the feed industry. And this ricin can be separated very well from the oil because the ricin is like hydrophilic, so likes to dissolve in water and not in the oil. So you can squeeze out the oil and leave behind the very toxic peptide. But there is also a small molecule inside the castor plant, which is called ricinin. And this ricinin is not as toxic as the ricin, but still quite toxic. Yeah. And for some reason, it's ending up in the castor oil to some extent. Yeah. Also not a lot likely, but it's in there. But it's not trivial to measure. And like the castor oil, because it's a good fatty acid source and it's cheap as well, I guess, is added to quite some feeds. And also in my own tank, yeah, when I feed a certain pellet food, the ricinin, this toxin, gets detectable in the water column.
Hmm.
And that, I mean, I'm very sure that even the company that produces these feeds, and maybe even the company that produces the castor plant oil, they are not at all aware of this component that might end up in the product. So that's really, like the flashlight story from the beginning. There is so many things nobody knows, and it's about time to find out or to find out more in this direction.
We might not need to post this. Big castor oil might come for you. There's some. That's pretty concerning. But so do you think that it could accumulate to toxic levels, or was it still relatively low?
It was relatively low, so I wouldn't expect it to accumulate. It's also not a very biopersistent chemical, so it will be skimmed out. It will biodegrade. Um, I guess it's never an issue in a reef tank, but it might be more of an issue like in aquaculture, where a lot of food is added. And yeah, because when it's in the food, it's also the animals like directly and ingesting it. Yeah, and so it's really just a matter of okay, how concentrated is it in the feed? Does it accumulate in the fish or whatever is feeding on the feeds? Yeah, or is there any negative impact on growth or on quality and so on and so forth? Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a can of worms.
Yeah, it's really the whole Organo-MS story, and it's I mean when we're doing a batch of analysis, it's like many hundred compounds we find in those samples, and I'm manually going also through the data, and I'm only including like hits that have a very good probability of being correct, because in non-targeted screening there's always some risk of having wrong assignments. So you because it's like million of compounds you're comparing to. It's so I'm really sorting out like the ones who are questionable, and still there is quite many remaining which have a very high score. So we can be pretty confident, okay, that's really this compound we believe that this compound is. And then often it's compounds I've never heard before, despite being in organic chemistry for like decades. And then the researching starts. Okay, where is this compound used? What's the aquatic toxicity of this compound? Is there anything I should tell the customer about it? Yeah. So the whole Organo-MS, it's a can of worms because there is so much data that's generated and needs to be interpreted, because otherwise it's of no use for the customer.
So let's talk about two very interesting chemicals that are coming to a new updated version of the Organo-MS, DMSP and Betaine. I was very, very excited to hear that you're going to be having these in there. I mean, even in college, when I skimmed the literature, as amateur as I am, I could not find any way to have direct quantification of DMSP. It was all you had it, and then you had a head chamber, and you quantified DMS, and it was something I could not do at university. So you told me, oh, yep, we got it, and I think that's going to be big. Maybe we should talk about the role of these compounds and what they can tell people about their tanks.
Yeah, DMSP is super interesting. I mean, there is so much literature, and I remember somebody writing me an email like last year. So, hey, Christoph, can you measure DMSP? And I was like, hey, no, this is too small and too polar. It's gonna be really hard to measure. We can't do it. And like our Organo-MS, like in the beginning of this year, received a major upgrade. Like we're now adding first a stabilizer to the samples, which conserve amino acids better. We managed to increase sensitivity by a factor of around 20, so we find even like lower concentrations. And we added like this section of highly polar and even small molecules to the spectrum of compounds we can measure. And this luckily includes DMSP. And then I was really skeptical. Okay, this compound looks a bit fragile. So is it stable in the sample? Yeah, does it survive like sample pre-treatment? And I was really happy to see like really good stability in DMSP. So we have a very good chance that the DMSP value we are measuring is really reflecting the DMSP value in the column. But let's first explain a bit what DMSP is all about and why it's so important. It's dimethyl sulfopropionate, and this is quite hard on the tongue. So everybody calls it DMSP. And it's produced by microalgae. So phytoplankton can produce quite a lot of DMSP, but interestingly, it's also produced by coral, and it serves like functions for the coral, but it also serves like global functions. But maybe first start with the coral. It's when everybody knows that the smell of a coral when you get it out of the water, especially acropora. This is like a bit of a sulfury smell, but very, very distinctive. It's when you're fragging some acro and you leave a little bit, you forget it, and then you enter the room again. You say, "Wow, that stinks!" Yeah, and this is like it's not the DMSP itself, which doesn't smell a lot, but it's the degradation product. So there is some volatile sulfur compounds formed by biologic degradation of the DMSP, and those are smelly. And why does the coral produce DMSP? It has protective function. So when there is like heat stress on the coral, the DMSP is protective. And there is oxidative stress to the coral, or osmotic stress, like salinity changes. DMSP has a protective function for the coral. So it's a bit of a stress indicator. Whenever the coral is stressed, you take out the acropora, you take it out of the water, and the DMSP production goes up quite a lot. Then there is many marine bacteria that see the DMSP as a very nice food source. They can utilize DMSP directly. And so the secretion of DMSP by the coral actively affects the microbiome, because the the bacteria that can utilize DMSP are in favor, of course, because they get this food source like all the time, and is of course fantastic for the coral. So it has strong impact on the coral microbiome we find in the slime coat of the coral. But there is not only good things, because like this DMSP is like it's a stress indicator, and we're using it as a stress indicator as well. If we find elevated DMSP level in the water, this can be a sign of coral stress, be it parasites, be it light stress, whatever. And who is the best victim for like pathogens? It's always the stressed ones. This is why we have a cold so often, likely because we're stressed, have a lot of work, and sleep too little. This is why we are perfect host for, or at least I am for the flu and whatsoever. The same is for coral. When the coral is stressed, like Vibrio bacteria really like to take the chances and try to overwhelm the coral, because a healthy coral is not such a nice target, because it might defend off the whole infection. And this is why the Vibrio, or at least some of the Vibrio, can more or less smell the DMSP. And when there is a lot of DMSP, this coral is stressed, and it tends to infection. And I strongly believe that the picture, there is like a alkalinity spike or some other, or a temperature spike or whatever, that everything's fine for like 2 weeks, and you think, okay, I've been lucky, nothing happened, and then suddenly you have your tissue necrosis and RTN events, and this can be like the chain. What's happening? The coral is stressed, is regulating up the DMSP production, this attracting pathogens like Vibrio. Those attached to the coral start multiplying, and it just takes some time to overwhelm the coral, and then you see the death or the symptoms. Yeah. So that's I think maybe you have some things to add, but that's in my view is that the main aspects how DMSP is interacting with coral in the wild and also in our aquariums.
Yeah, that's pretty much my understanding of it, and it's excited me for a long time because the literature is very, very clear, at least with Vibrio coralliticus, which is the kind of granddaddy model coral pathogen that, I mean, I think the time frame is within 10 minutes of detecting DMSP. They have 50% of their gene expression changes, and they just turn on all of these weapons, so to speak, these virulence factors, and they go and infect the coral within a 20-minute time frame.
Yeah,
And
that's really fast.
it's just such a potent chemoattractant. And I think a lot of the other potential putative pathogens, maybe even protozoan ones, could utilize it as well. So I'm excited for this test to hit the market because, like you said, coral is kind of on a different time scale when it comes to health in their microbiome. And it does seem to take about a week or two after an initial stress event. So let's say that you've got a stress event, you send in an Organo-MS, you don't have STN or RTN yet, but your DMSP is really high. You now have a way to do something about it before something happens. You could run a bunch of carbon, you could do a water change, you could dilute that level down and maybe prevent infection, which is it's an insurance policy.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, this I was thinking about this now for some time. What if you have like this stress event and you add DMSP on purpose into your water column to offset this concentration gradient? They have like a higher, because it's non-toxic, they have a higher DMSP level in the water compared to the coral slime coat. The Vibrio would have no idea where to go to.
Interesting, like a smoke screen. Yeah, I like that idea too.
Yeah.
If anything, it could help things too, because I mean, usually there's just runaway oxidative stress from ROS production from the coral's immune system. So maybe, dosing DMSP could both help a stressed coral and confuse the pathogen. I like that idea.
Would be interesting to try out. Yeah. I mean, with DMSP, it's fairly new. We can measure this chemical. And what we still need to figure out is like the variants of DMSP like in different tanks. Because of course, when you have a higher stocking density of coral, you start just with a higher DMSP level. Or if you're dosing phytoplankton, you're also starting with a higher DMSP level, of course. Yeah. So that's a reason why it's quite wise to conduct like Organo-MS maybe 2 to 3 times a year or whenever there is some issues. So you to get more or less a baseline for your tank. Because when your tank is like full of acropora, your baseline DMSP might be already quite high, which might be already, a stress sign in a tank that has a way lower coral stocking level. So this is something we have difficulties comparing tank to tank, but in the same tank, of course, it can give very valuable information.
Yeah, probably in like a 5 year time period, it'll end up being that an SPS dominant versus a mixed reef versus LPS is all going to be a different kind of baseline of DMSP. And it'll probably scale with, yeah, like you said, stocking or tank volume overall. So I think, yeah, like a quarterly test to see a baseline, to then maybe in your fourth quarter, it's 2 times as high. Okay, there's probably trouble at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the beta 9 is also pretty interesting to me. It's not as talked about in the literature as DMSP, but it does seem to be a stress indicator as well. And I've noticed there were some papers about heat stress corals, and most of those papers they had higher levels of beta 9 when they were about to go through like bleaching or a disease event. So those two in combination, I feel like could also be something of a like kind of redundancy. So let's say you've got the problem of a bunch of acropora in your tank and your DMSP is high. Maybe your beta 9 might be suppressed. I don't know if there's a correlation, but if they're both
Yeah,
high, probably an issue.
yeah, yeah. We need more data to be really sure about that. But I was also thinking that's also one of those compounds that are really hard to come by analytically, because you can't measure it on GC and you can't measure it on HPLC, and it's just a very small, very polar compound that's usually just very hard to get hold of. And we also now have it like in our routine measurement. Yeah.
Are there any other changes coming to the Organo-MS?
Not really. I mean, there's been really big changes now with this year with amino acids. That's also an interesting topic, because are you dosing aminos, Salem, in your systems?
I'm feeding my fish,
You're feeding a fish.
but
Yeah,
not in the concentrated form, though. No.
no, but that contributes, of course, to. I mean, you have amino acids like everywhere. You have some baseline. You find it even in tap water. There is some amino acids. It's really everywhere. But what we've seen when you're spiking your tank, so you're dosing amino acids, and then we took like. After 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, after 20 minutes, we took samples and we're running it through the amino acid screening. And I've been quite surprised to find this really short half-life of the amino acids. So it's like
Hmm.
20 minutes half-life roughly for all of the amino acids. And this was unexpected, because I was thinking that there is like a longer residency time. And I'm absolutely not saying that it's coral taking up these amino acids. Likely it's bacteria, it's some other factors. It's a combination of all life in the tank. But still, that the coral, and there is plenty of literature out there, benefits from the availability of free dissolved amino acids, because they don't have to invest all this energy making the amino acids themselves, which they can, but it's an effort. And who wants to have an effort when you can just take it? Yeah, it's way easier.
No,
And
it definitely makes sense to me. It just from a consumer point of view, I think that likely people will probably add too high of a concentration at once, and they see issues. So I think
like, yeah.
this I like because you could actually find maybe with some experiments the dosing could be fine tuned to where you get the benefits, but you're not just you know
Feelings, I know. Yeah, and
yes, yes.
it's just very important to spread out the amino acid dose, to not have like a dose once a day. But this is, for me, calcium is something you don't need it on a dosing pump. Yeah, calcium is also fine if you dose it once a day, because it's a very slow moving parameter. Yeah, amino acids are not, and nutrients are not. So those are the things you really wanna dose like on more time points more frequently per day, just to have like a better baseline availability. So the peak concentration, of course, will be much lower. We more resemble natural levels, but the overall availability for the coral will be much better.
Yeah, I think that that's probably. I think that I would be interested in seeing tanks that have dialed in. Um, I guess so. From your point of view, if someone sends in Organo-MS, should they have detectable levels at the lower set points, or would you be happy if someone has amino acids on a doser and they're applying a small amount over a 24-hour period and it's not detectable?
Usually it's always detectable, but usually at low levels. And I think having all amino acids, we measure all the proteinogenic amino acids. If you have all of them detectable, that's already a good sign. Yeah, but it would be, I mean, like if it's 5 nanogram per liter, that's like close to nothing. So
Yeah, yeah.
I personally like to see like a bit higher levels, like in the range of zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.5 ppb, something like this for each individual amino acid. But it's a bit hard also to interpret this data, and this is something I'm also telling people in the results, that when they're dosing amino acids, it makes a lot of a difference when they take their sample in respect to the amino acid dose applied to the tank. Because if you apply it shortly after the dose has been applied, you have like a higher level compared to 1 hour later. So yeah, this came as a surprise to us as well, that this is so volatile, that concentration is decreasing so fast. Yeah, so it's something where it doesn't make so much sense to really say, okay, you need exactly this level. Yeah, this is just something you can't do. Yeah, but it's a good sign to avoid like overshooting certain levels, and to manage to have all the amino acids like at least detectable.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Like, I guess in my mind, it would make sense that maybe you're not hitting the exact set points, but there are some detectable at a low level, and that you at least have input that way. Because if you sample, let's say, an hour, like you dose once every hour over 24 hours, a small amount, but you happen to sample in between those and it's lower, you can assume that there was uptake during that,
Sure,
hour window.
sure.
So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes sense to me. I think it just is. I think it would be difficult to convey to consumers because they're used to chasing,
set
inorganic with
points.
ICP. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
something like this, it makes more sense to me that if there's input at a low level, you're likely to get the benefits rather than this is the set point because people will probably just tinker all day
yeah.
and
No,
probably overdo it.
Organo-MS is really not for number chasers. So, like we have for the amino acids, we have some set points. Those are derived from published data from like natural reefs. Um, but for most things, it's best to have them non-detectable. Like you don't want your medications in there, you don't want your pesticides and your herbicides in there. And it's interesting to learn about your tank, to find all those surprise findings in non-targeted screening, and learn about where those product or those chemicals might originate from, and change your husbandry like based on that. But usually there is nothing like comparable with ICP, that you are low in some elements and then you just buy the bottles and dose them to your tank. So
So, I
that's a
guess
very different approach. Yeah.
what are some good ways that people can? I think that diagnosis can occur through this. So you say, "Oh, I've got ricinin that's building up. Maybe I should quit X pellet I'm adding, and or I've got testosterone and I should wear gloves now." What are some other ways that if people already have issues, they can resolve those? Carbon, water changes. Is there something you found to be effective?
Yeah, it's skimming, it's water changes, it's carbon, but the number one rule is always to find out the source. And this is where product safety comes in. I mean, there could be plastics that are leaching like massive amounts of plasticizers, or there is like a ethyl phthalate, which is a plasticizer, but it's also added to ethanol to make it
Hmm.
undrinkable. So, like industrial ethanol, which might be used in products, could contain quite some amounts of plasticizers as well. Yeah, and So it's all about creating awareness, finding sources, removing those sources or replacing them by safer materials. And this is helpful for the aquarist, but this is also very helpful for the industry, because when you're a skimmer manufacturer or a tubing manufacturer or whatever, it's very hard for you, or a food manufacturer, it's very hard for you to find out, okay, is there any potential harm caused by my product? Yeah. And yeah, we're filling this gap more or less with the Organo-MS to increase safety here and to make products safer, and yeah, to just create awareness.
Something else that I forgot to mention that has been beneficial at our shop. So our unit is here, and right next door is an acrylic wrapping place that wraps cars. And their
Okay.
waste bin is right sharing the wall with our main 500-gallon display tank.
Okay.
So I was helping the owner while I was at Reef Builders, had, perfect MS, even aquabiomics reports looked like, good relative abundance of the different families, but nothing would grow. Everything with
Okay.
STN, RTN, not
Mhm.
even sponges, no microfauna. And finally, he got a VOC meter, and it was off the charts, and it would spike
Yeah.
whenever they had done work. So we
Okay.
put up a bunch of extra padding, ran carbon constantly, and then he got
Yeah.
an in-home air filter with HEPA and carbon. And
Okay. That's good. Yeah.
my assumption was likely a lot of that, air contamination was able to sink into the tank. So maybe there's some value to filtering skimmer air with things like carbon
This
as
is
well.
this is what I like to recommend. Many people have like the lime on the skimmer intake, on the air intake, to remove carbon dioxide from the ambient air. But you can also add some carbon to it. Have some soda lime and a layer of carbon as well. Or if you're not chasing pH, then just add some carbon, because of course the skimmer is like the lung of the reef tank. So everything that's in the air, and we find a lot of nicotine, for example, in reef tanks. So everything that's in the air also ends up in the tank, and the carbon can take out at least the majority of it. Yeah.
Yeah, after those changes, it's now been about probably a year, and the tank is everything is normal. Everything is growing.
Fantastic.
So
But but that's the super interesting cases where ICP is fine and everything else is fine. Your lighting is perfect, your flow is perfect, but still, obviously, the tank is suffering, and this is where the Organo-MS comes in place. Yeah.
yeah, there was even a maintenance account we have at a pet groomer, and you walk in and you just get hit with like a perfume smell because wet
Oh,
dog. So they have a bunch of like the little plug-in air diffusers everywhere,
okay. Yeah.
and we were like, yeah, we need to move the tank out of here, and they said no, and we've got a bill for a whole lot of carbon every week for every month, pretty much is how it
Yeah, I
works.
can imagine. I mean, it's crazy. I've just been at the Reef Mania fair in Germany, and we slept at the hotel, and there was next to the bed there was like a little perfume sprayer, and it was called like a pillow spray, to make you sleep nice, and perfect smells for your dreams and blah blah blah. And then I opened like the little card, and there was a huge like warning sign, so might cause serious eye irritation or might be a skin irritant. And,
Oh.
like the perfect thing to just spray on your pillow. And
Oh
it's
my
yeah,
god.
it's with many perfumes and daily care products and so on, that it's just because it's allowed, it's not always like the best idea to use it.
Yeah. So I think that the kind of wrap up message here is that you don't know until you test, and you might be
That's
surprised.
true. That's true. Yeah, I
Yeah,
might be surprised as well.
yeah, yeah. I think that this is really something. If you've got an issue in your tank, or if you have a healthy tank, is a good time to do it to see the good baseline. It's something to send off with an ICP test, and you really get a much fuller picture of what's happening in your system.
Yeah, it's very important to, when you run into problems, then do both. Send us the ICP-MS sample and send us the Organo-MS sample, because there is no overlap between those tests. Like the one is purely inorganic, the other one is purely organic. And just I'd like to talk very quickly about the price, because many people find it as being a very high priced test, especially compared to ICP analysis. But it's when you move to a standard contract lab and ask them about the panel of substances to be analyzed and ask them about non-targeted screening, you're suddenly in a range of several thousand dollars per sample, and usually then even the volume is lower than what we are doing. So that's we've been really optimizing this a lot, so we can offer this price, and still there is a lot of maintenance and running costs going on, and we have to at least make it like a even thing, so we are not losing money with that, but there is so that everybody's aware that for what is offered, the price is very, very low.
Yeah, that might be a good last thing we talk about is, the associated cost of doing business with this machine. I mean, I never used liquid chromatography, but the gas chromatography machine we had, access to the databases was subscription based and an absorbent amount of money yearly. We had to get maintenance done sometimes twice or even quarterly if it was used in a high enough volume, and that was a lot of money. And
Yeah,
then on top of that,
sure.
you've got positive pressure and everything to actually run an analytical lab. So in comparison, it's a very affordable kit compared
It
to anything offered.
it is, yeah, and it's nothing you do like an ICP like every month. Yeah, if you do it like 2 or 3 times a year, I think that's good. Or in case you're running into problems, and I think so as well. It's affordable. It gives you a lot of information that's just impossible to obtain otherwise, and there is for sure something we can learn about your tank as well.
And I think if you're a manufacturer, like you mentioned, good luck finding anyone third party that's going to offer that level of service for that price if you want a new level of quality control.
Yeah,
So I
true.
think it's good you've brought this to the market, and I think it's going to have, especially as time goes on, we're probably going to learn a lot about things that we had no idea about before.
Yeah, I think it was just the first year, and we still had so many interesting findings that have been not on my radar at all for the years before. And of course, there's the more the test spread, so the more samples we receive, the better we also get in interpreting this data and learning more from it. So there's for sure a lot to come. Yeah.
The very last question, and probably the most important, if someone would like to get one, where can they purchase it at? Inside of the US, outside? Where do they get it?
So outside of the US, you can obtain it from us directly from oceamo.com. We have in the US our partner Reef Moonshiners, Andre. He's very, very knowledgeable, and he's distributing our test kits in the US and also returns the samples back to our lab in Austria. So have very, very short turnaround times also for ICP analysis. In Canada, we also have wholesale, which is working very nicely. So there is, no matter where you are in the world, there is some way to get it.
All right. Well, Christoph, thank you very much for your time today. As a parting gift to the audience, I'm going to play the money video that you sent me to show the power of this and
Yeah.
show some pretty funny results. So thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on, and we hope to have you back when we've learned even more about the organic side of our tanks.
Thanks for having me, Salem. It was a very nice conversation. So thanks for watching, everyone, and see you next time. Bye bye.